What's up, guys? In today's episode, we're going to talk about the power of branding yourself with four-time Emmy Award-winning TV host, Mr. Chris Van Vliet. All right, guys, we are back, and I've got an amazing friend, another acronym friend, right? CMH, CVV. Where's MJF, right?
Oh, please, no.
No one's going to know what we're talking about.
That's
We'll
right.
get into that. Anyway, so I was going to be in Chicago and realized my friend Chris Van Vliet here, I've been following a long time, was going to be here as well for an event that we're going to get into and talk about. But I'm like, you know what? Let's sit down. Let's see if we can make this work.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was like just a off-the-cuff kind of thing, and you were like, hey, let's do it, man. Let's rock and roll. So here we are in your hotel room, rock and roll, and I know you're up super late. I was up super late, so we're kind of dragging through this thing. But Mr. Chris Van Vliet, man, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's early morning here in Chicago. We're flying back in a few hours here, but I always think that interviews in person have so much more energy.
Right?
Yes.
I'm glad you get it.
Yes, of
Because
course.
I was like, we can do audio, but we're going to be in the same city. Like, let's tackle this
And
thing.
even if it's just 1% better,
Right.
I'd rather do that.
Right.
So I'm glad we're making this happen. I do
Plus-
all my interviews in person.
Plus, like I said, I've been doing the podcast for a long time. You've been doing YouTube. Now we're switching
Yeah.
roles here, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Like, having both mediums, I feel like it's just so much more effective.
It is. Yeah, so
Right.
we're on the same timeline, but completely flipped.
Right,
Yeah, like
exactly.
you just started YouTube a few months ago. I
Yeah.
just started my podcast a few months ago.
Yeah.
After doing YouTube for 8 years or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, so we can learn from each other. Here.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. Cool, man. So, let's talk about, because a lot of my audience, obviously, unless they follow the pro wrestling world, they probably don't exactly know who you are. Maybe
Sure.
they've seen you on TV. I know you've been in the pop culture space and stuff like that for a long time. But kind of give us high-level view, who you are, what you've done, and now kind of what we're doing in Chicago in a hotel room, talking about pro wrestling.
What a lovely hotel room. What a lovely...
This beautiful piece
it's
of,
beautiful.
I mean...
We tried to take it off the wall, but it's
Yeah.
bolted to the wall. My main job, my day job, if you will, is I'm a TV host, television personality, radio personality, based in Miami now.
Yeah.
I'm originally from Toronto. I've been in these United States now for 10 years. I host a show in Miami called Deco Drive. It's a daily entertainment show on weeknights, interview celebrities, review movies. I've been on red carpets all across the world. But at the heart of this, at the core of this, I'm a giant wrestling fan. And I've been a wrestling fan my whole life. I wanted to be a wrestler at one point in my life. And through my connections in television and radio, I was interviewing some wrestlers here and there. And I just started putting those interviews on YouTube. And this thing has really scaled. And now I'm getting quite a few views on those. And that's kind of where my focus has been. My focus has been on doing as many of these wrestling interviews as I possibly can. I'm also a big bass fisherman. So I started a bass fishing tungsten company. For any bass fishermen out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
For everyone else, it's basically if you're fishing with a plastic bait, they float, so you need something to sink it down to the bottom. For the longest time, it was lead. Now tungsten's better for the environment. It's also better for fishing. So, kind of tying in the wrestling to the fishing, it's called Woo Tungsten. Is
Nice.
the name of my company. So I've been following my passions and trying to find a way to do things that I love and also make a career out of it.
Now, I intended to ask you this question later, and first of all, I got to say this. So, interviewing somebody that does this for like a living, right, as a career, like on TV and what have you,
Yeah, sure.
that puts so much pressure because I'm just like, hey, I just started this thing and I have no professional background at all doing this, and I'm always like, oh God, this person's
No,
on
you're
TV.
great. Come on.
So, anyways, but being somebody that's multi-passionate, right, like somebody that you grew up, like where did the wrestling passion come from? Where did the bass fishing? Because I see a lot of people struggle, specific entrepreneurs like you, that they don't necessarily, and I was this way too, they don't necessarily know where they fit in the world because they like so many different things. They're like, well, I could see myself going this way, I could see myself going this way, I could see myself going this way. So
Sure.
how did you kind of find intersectionality to make all these things work where you don't feel like you're losing your focus on any particular direction?
So fishing was always something, like I grew up, like an hour away from some lakes in Ontario. So that was like a passion early on. I was on the wrestling team in high school. I wanted to be a pro wrestler because I just fell in love with, in the wrestling world, was called the Attitude Era.
Right.
97, 98, 99. That was what made me really love pro wrestling. I was a backyard wrestler, which was incredibly dangerous and silly, but
You had one of those backyard leagues?
Yeah,
What was the
it was-
name of your league?
we were the HCW.
Everybody had a name for
course
their
they
league.
did.
Everybody did.
And I was Chris Sharp, and I was this heel, this bad guy that didn't like anybody. So like I had all these little things that I loved, and when it came time to pick a college major, and you're 17, 18 years old, and they're
Right.
basically saying, like, what do you want to do for the rest of your life?
Right.
Which is the craziest thing to think
It's
about.
crazy.
I'm like, well, I liked those communication classes I took in high school. And we had a communication studies class in high school where we would write out the script for a 3-minute segment on a Friday. We would write it all weekend on a Friday. We'd all vote on, like, oh, that was the best one in our small groups. And then Monday through Thursday, we would tape it and edit it and put it all together, and we would all make a show out of all of our little groups making these segments. And I always was the on-air host in this because I just loved being in front of the camera.
Yeah.
I was the vice president of my student council. I did the morning announcements. I hosted the talent show. So I realized that I liked presenting and that type of stuff. So when it came time to pick a college major, I'm like, well, that communications thing seemed pretty cool. I guess I'll do that. And then you get to college and you realize, well, you're not actually doing the TV stuff
Right.
day in, day out. You're like learning theories and writing term papers. And I realized I had this epiphany in my senior year. I woke up one day, and college is a lot of fun. Some of my best friendships were formed there. At the bars there, of course, that was the best time of my life. But I also realized, like, if you didn't feel like going to class in college, you didn't have to.
Right.
So I had this epiphany in my senior year that I woke up one day and I went, oh my God, I'm going to have to work for the next 40-ish years of my life when this is all done. I just want to have a job that I don't hate. Like, that was it. I just didn't want to have a job I want to have a job I didn't hate. I didn't want to not enjoy Sundays because Monday was the next day.
Right.
So I loved the idea of broadcast. That seemed like a fun job. So I started asking if I could volunteer at some local TV stations, some local radio stations. That's kind of how it got started. And that's where I started to follow that passion and went, this is a job that I'm not going to hate. Even if I wasn't making a lot of money, at least I could be excited to go for it every single day. And obviously, it was 2005 when I graduated from college. The broadcasting world's changed a lot.
Yeah.
It's evolved into what we're doing here right now and what I've done with my YouTube channel. But for that to be the building blocks of it is I don't want to hate this and I want to chase after something that interests me. That's kind of where I found it for me.
Did you know, because entrepreneurship has become, even from the point that I graduated right behind you, 2010, 11, entrepreneurship even at that point was not as mainstream, if you will, as it is now. Like, now it's become like a sexy trend that everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. And I think a lot of it has to do, I talk about this a lot, but you entered in right before the second worst time in U.S. history in terms of the economy. I came out right in the middle of it, right? And so I think a lot of people in our generation, the millennial generation, we had to find other means because the jobs were scarce, right?
Yeah.
So did you know that entrepreneurship was an option at that time? Or were you like, hey, this job looks cool, this might be a thing I want to pursue? Or was that just not even in your brain at all at that time?
It wasn't. It wasn't in my brain at all. I mean, I had maybe some entrepreneurial tendencies when I was younger, like shoveling the neighbor's driveway, because in Canada there's a lot of snow, or, like raking leaves, or like little things like that. I had entrepreneurial tendencies, but that was just basically because, like, I wanted to make some extra money.
Right.
But, working in the TV industry, there wasn't this idea of, like, I can go do this on my own. Because you can't. In 2005, 6, 7, all the way up until maybe the last handful of years, if you wanted to go live, now you can push a button on your phone, which is amazing.
No, but it's when it first happened, it was terrifying.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like, I don't even trust people on the road, right? Like, let alone going live and streaming their lives. Like, that is a terrifying proposition.
But back in the day, if you wanted to go live, you had to own a TV station. So no, that wasn't even an option.
Yeah.
The only option there was like that maybe even felt kind of entrepreneurial was freelancing on top of, like, I always wanted like the set job, like this is the TV show that I'm on, and maybe if you freelanced a little bit, that was like really the only way you could be entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
So when I was in Cleveland, that was my first American television market. I was there 2010 to 2015. I loved it. I had some amazing memories there, and went to the Oscars 4 times, and covered the Grammys 5 times. Like, amazing stuff. But I also I started to host a radio show there. I started to write for the local magazine, Cleveland Magazine there. And those were the types of entrepreneurial things I was doing. Interesting. Because those were the opportunities that were in front of me.
No, so these were all things that they were your initiatives. Like, no one asked you to do those things. You just started doing them on your own.
Yeah.
So I hear about this a lot, actually.
Oh, yeah. That's been my whole life.
Yeah, he does this with Hershey's. He's like, it's entrepreneurship, right? So it's taking ownership within an organization and kind of building that entrepreneurial background within a major corporation. And here's the thing, man. I want to highlight that because I think there's so many people that they inherently view, if they're not already building their startup venture, that they're wasting their time right now.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I don't think, and maybe you would agree with this, that you are where you are with your platform without the background that you've had.
Oh,
because I watch your stuff and I'm like, this guy's good, right? Like I want to subscribe to his stuff. Whereas someone else that doesn't have the background or the credibility that you have, they wouldn't know how to put all this stuff together. I mean, people can't see you this setup here, but like it's elaborate. It takes a lot of practice and a lot of skill to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So would you say that gave you a huge advantage in terms of, hey, now I have this idea of interviewing wrestlers and like building my own platform, that you just kind of hit the ground running as soon as you wanted to do that because of that?
And I think it's part of like that 10,000 hours thing.
Totally.
And by no means by saying that I have 10,000 hours there, but by putting in that work, that when it came time to turn the camera on myself and just put this out into the YouTube world rather than putting it onto TV, I already kind of knew the ins and outs of it, you know, and I'd gotten rid of a lot of the ums and the ahs, and I knew how to like.
Still working on that one.
No, that is a tough one especially when you're having these types of conversations.
Yes.
But I think the biggest problem, or the biggest thing I learned through working in television for all those years, was how to get a point across. And I think that there's so many people, especially in podcasts, that feel like they need to fill like a 2 or 3 hour format. Well, if you're filling a 2 or 3 hour format with stuff that could have been said in 50 minutes, what are you doing with the other hour and 10 minutes? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like when you get that bag of potato chips and then you open it up and you're like, oh, most of that was air. So I think that that's been a big thing that I learned with having a broadcasting background. But I chased after like every opportunity I've ever had.
Okay.
Like my very first internship, I reached out to this TV station that was 60 miles from my hometown and said, hey, I'm going to be in Peterborough, Ontario next week. It's my spring break. I'd love to come in and talk to you about an internship. And they were like, well, if you're going to be in town, you know, swing on by. Your resume looks pretty impressive because I had done all this volunteer work with like the bunch of radio stations, street teams with radio stations, all this stuff in college. And I went in and he's like, well, since you were in town, I thought I'd take this meeting. And I wasn't going to be in town at all. I completely made this up because I knew it would give me that edge.
Yeah.
Because if I just said, hey, will you give me an internship?
Right.
They wouldn't even respond to me. So
very valuable lesson there, guys.
yes, it's like chasing after this was big. And I went in and had a meeting and he said, look, we don't usually take on interns that aren't associated with a college program. It's like an insurance thing. But I see something in you. And I like that you chased after this. So we're going to give you an internship.
Very cool.
That internship turned into a job. And here I am driving 60 miles each way to do this job that was paying not very much money. And working at in the fish department of a pet store of a mall, scooping dead fish to pay for the gas to go to my TV job.
Oh my god!
Like so juxtaposed, right?
Yeah.
And this was amazing that I had this experience on television and I was able to break into the business. Chex TV was the name of the TV station, but I was like, I'm 22 years old. I don't want to be reporting on like news.
Right.
I want to do more fun stuff.
Right.
So I basically faked a demo reel, which in the industry is like your highlight reel. And I made it look like I had like some experience with like hosting and MTV type of stuff. And there was an MTV2 show in Vancouver, which was 3,000 miles from where I lived in Toronto, that was hiring. And I thought, I think I can get this. I think I can put together something that makes it look like I could do this job.
Sure.
So I sent it over to them, didn't hear anything back. And I knew the name of the person that was doing the hiring. So I called the station directly and I said, hey, is Catherine Peterson there? And they said, one moment, please. And I'm like, oh my God. And she answered the phone and I was like, oh, hey, I sent you my thing. Did you have a chance to look at it? And she's like, I haven't looked at it yet, but I'll get to it. And then she sent me an email a couple days later and said, you know, we're looking at everything this week. And in the signature of her email was her direct phone number. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to remember that.
You're right.
And a couple days later, I called her directly at her desk and said,
Smart.
I'm going to be in Vancouver next week, which, once again, was a total bomb.
Right.
Because very far away. It's like a 5-hour flight. I'm like, I'm going to be there next week. If you have some time, I'd love to just meet you in person and talk to you about the opportunity. And that was what got me the job.
Interesting.
Was going out there, meeting in person, and showing that I had, like, you know, the drive to want to get after that.
So that brings up a really good question that I didn't plan to ask you, but there's a lot of entrepreneurs that do similar to what you've done. I've done that myself, where it's like, oh yeah, we've totally done this, right? But here's the thing, it's like the chicken and the egg, because everybody wants to see that you've done something. And that could be a job or it could be an entrepreneurial endeavor, right? And some people, the whole fake it till you make it thing. How do you balance that with still operating within your own integrity?
Well, I think that it's a different world now. Like back then, to get TV experience, you needed to work at a TV station. Like even buying a camera back then, and this was only like 15 years ago, would cost you like $1,000 or something like that.
Yeah, we're old farts over here, right? When cameras were, you got to put them back up on your shoulder.
I think that it's a different world now, because if you have a great following on social media or on YouTube, I think that a TV station or radio station might take a look at you and go, oh, that person is pretty good on camera. Maybe we could hone this or change this.
Like Bleacher Report or SB Nation. Like those guys are getting acquired or getting jobs like ESPN because of their platforms.
So it's a different world now.
It is.
So I think that to answer your question, I think that is a very fine balance. Of like, I don't think that there should be like these lies of I'm going to be there next week don't hurt as much as like I have the ability to do this, or I know how to use this program, or I've met this person. Like those are lies that are, do hurt you.
Okay.
It was only a lie that I was going to be there next Thursday until I booked the flight and then was there next Thursday.
Right.
But if they said, oh, do you know how to use this, this radio program, Scott, which is a big radio program, and I went, oh yeah, of course I do. And then they go in there and go, all right, well, use it. And I went, I don't know. I think that would hurt you.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think you've got to work within the means of like what makes sense.
Well, I've suggested that both to my students and my clients. Actually, just recently, within the past couple of weeks, interviewed a guy on my show, was like he is the player in his space in the country. Like serves 95% of the market, like completely cornered the market. And I'm on an advisory board for one of my former students now. I'm part of his company. And randomly, after I interviewed, it just fell in my lap, right, that I got this interview with him. I'm like, you guys have to connect. You need to volunteer. Tell them you're going to be out in Arizona, because this is a connection you need to make.
Yes.
And whether you're planning to or not, you need to show. So here's the thing. This is the way I frame it. It's a sign of respect to that person that you're willing to make that trip.
For sure.
Right? Like you're not faking anything. You're just going out of your way to show them the respect that they probably have earned and deserve.
Yeah,
you know
and it's an investment. If that flight to Arizona costs you $400, that is an investment in your future and something that's going to certainly pay off.
Right. Cool. All right, so you have a saying, vague goals get vague results. Right? Is that a Jack Canfield? Are you a Jack Canfield guy?
I don't know where that... I think I kind of borrowed that from someone, and then by no means is this my phrase.
No, I wasn't in... Yeah,
but it's... I think the phrase just makes so much sense, because people come up with these vague goals.
Yeah.
And in the end, you get this result that's like pretty similar to the goal you set.
Right.
So the opposite of that is to set specific goals, because specific goals will get specific results. Here's an example for you. January 1st, someone goes, I want to lose some weight this year. All right, well, great. If you lose 1 pound next week, you've lost some weight this year. So I think it's important to, if we're going to use the weight example, to go, I want to lose 15 pounds by June 1st.
Okay.
All right, well, great. Now you have something you got to work towards. And the cool thing about that is when you do achieve that goal, even if it's just a micro goal, when you do achieve that goal, you've got this real sense of accomplishment. Like, man, if I could do that, well, what else could I do?
Right.
It also gives you something to work towards. And I think there's a lot of people in our space that start a podcast or start a YouTube channel.
Just to do it, right?
Right, which is very commendable.
Sure.
That you've taken that first step, because that is the most important thing, is actually doing it. Because I talked to a lot of people this weekend here in Chicago that were like, oh, I've always wanted to do what you do. I'm like,
why not then?
Yeah, do it. Yes, if you want to start a YouTube channel, you can literally do it right here in front of us. Like, just do it on your phone. So I think it's important, yes, got to take that first step, but then from there, you got to figure out what your next step is.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to upload X amount of videos per week. I want to have X amount of subscribers by this date. Right. And I think it's important to work towards that. Otherwise, you're just getting into a got and just driving aimlessly.
And that's the part I want to get to, because how do you make it? So that sounds great, and I just bought the T-shirt.
What? Thank you.
I gotta support, man. I gotta show the love. Because I believe that, right? Like I talk about it all the time, and I read the book. I'm a big Michael Hyatt guy, and he talks about making your goals actionable, right? Have smarter goals, and he kind of breaks down what that acronym means. But a lot of people, like you said, they just get in the car and they don't know where they're going with that. Yeah. So for you, how do you normally take a goal and make it actionable? Like, is it, hey, this is goal number 1. I want to get, like you said, I want to get to 5,000 subscribers or whatever. But like,
sure.
Because I think most people, we overestimate willpower. we just assume that this is just this thing that we can just always tap into.
Yeah.
But if you don't start seeing, especially in entrepreneurship, man, because the end of the road goal might be, and oftentimes is, years and years away. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
you start out and, you know, I don't know how it was for you with your YouTube, but a lot of people start a content platform, or any business for that matter, and they go years before they see any kind of, you know what I mean? So you have to set little goals along the way so that you feel like you're making progress in achieving those goals. So for you, how do you not make your goals vague, and how do you take that and make it actionable into your own life?
I reverse engineer the things that I want.
That's literally what I put in the question was, do you reverse engineer?
Yeah, no, I do. So I look at someone who is on the path that I want to be on. And I take a look at, you know, I'm not aiming like crazy high. I'm not being like, you know, that person has 10 million subscribers, that's where I want to be, or that person's Ryan Seacrest in hosting everything. Yeah. You know, because that's the space that I'm from, being a TV host.
Sure.
So I kind of go, and I would do this with people like a Ryan Seacrest or like a Mario Lopez when I was getting into the TV industry. I'd go, all right, they're here, I'm here. Well, what are all the steps that they took to get there? And I would look up, I would read a lot of bios. So I'd be like, all right, so what school did they go to? What did they study? Were they in certain clubs when they were in school? Were they working radio jobs? Were they doing these other things? That was really important to me, realizing like all the steps that they had taken. Because it's so easy to turn on the TV and see someone super famous, super successful, like The Rock, or like Tyler Perry, or like Tony Robbins, or anybody, name whoever you want.
Sure.
And to go, oh, you know, they've always been that way. Well, no. Then you look at all these stories, like The Rock named his company $7 Production because he had a moment where he had $7 in his pocket.
That's crazy.
You know, Tyler Perry was homeless before he built this empire that he has. So it's those types of things to realize that, like, they didn't just go from having $7 to having, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars. So I reverse engineer that back to the step that I'm at. So maybe I'm not at step 1. Maybe I'm at step 4, and they're at step 17. But I want to know what those 13 steps are in between.
I think that's an amazing point, because most people, what they do is these people have become so iconic, right?
Yes.
In terms of where they've gotten to, that it scares people away from even trying, right? They're like, well, I'm never going to get to Mario Lopez, so why would I even try? Like, it's so far. And I have this too. Like, I see like a Gary Vaynerchuk or somebody like that whom I aspire at some point in my career to have that kind of an influence and impact, right? And you see that. And I have to remind myself, I tell my wife, who's helping us with this amazing recording, I tell her all the time, I'm like, where was Gary at my age?
Yes.
Right? And if you really look at it that way and dissect it, for all intents and purposes, I would say I'm further along than where he was, right? But like, he's laying that path. And here's the other thing too, and I want to see if you agree with this. They also show you how to fix the mistakes that they made if you follow their blueprint.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, what did they do that I could augment or do better, right, than they did, so that I can make this a more swift path? And I think that's the whole reason why they share what they share, at least in the content space.
Well, Tony Robbins always says success leaves clues.
Right.
And I think that that's so important. Like, instead of trying to figure it out for yourself,
it's crazy.
Why don't you just kind of follow in the footsteps of those people that have come before you that were successful? Take a little bit from this person, a little bit from this person.
Right.
Learn from everybody and make it, you know, apply to your own story. I love when Gary Vaynerchuk talks about that people underestimate what they can, you know the phrase I'm talking about, right?
What you overestimate what you can do in a year, you underestimate what you can do in 10.
Exactly. And people always look at like, oh man, well, this month wasn't that good. Well, yeah, but where are you compared to where you were last year?
Yeah.
And then compared to 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and 4 years ago. So, you know, I think for me, it's just important to see what other people have done and then try to apply that to my own life.
Okay, so what do you do though when you're on that path and you have setbacks, right? I know at this point, obviously, people see you and they're like, man, you're one of those guys in this space, specifically as it relates to interviewing wrestlers in that space. Is like,
which is so crazy. That's the best part about the world we live in now.
Right.
That you can take an interest and then like niche it down like 10 times. Like with the interviews, like not only am I doing YouTube videos, then down to like celebrity, then down to like wrestling, and you know, that's so niche. Then with my fishing company, like the outdoors, down to fishing, down to bass fishing, down to a very specific type of bass fishing.
Niches to riches.
That's the amazing part of the world that we're in right now.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that even 5-10 years ago.
Totally not. Yeah. But what have you done on your path where, hey, I want to do this thing with the wrestling, you know, interviews, or I want to do with bass fishing, not getting the momentum that I'd like to see? What do you do to kind of recommit yourself or appreciate right? To get over those tough times of continuing to push forward when you're not getting the results that you expected.
And I think you just have to realize that that's part of it. Like not every video is going to be a home run.
Sure.
Not every product launch is going to be a home run. And I think you just got to, you got to realize that there's lessons to be learned there and go, oh, maybe we shouldn't do it this way. Or, when we did it this way, this really worked. So let's try that. And I hope that people listening to this and watching this realize that if I can carve out something in bass fishing and professional wrestling, whatever the thing is that you're thinking about, like, is completely possible.
Yeah.
Like, these are two, like, absolutely
completely different universes, yeah.
but tiny niches,
Yeah.
And I have a great business partner in my fishing company, and I made a decision early on that I wasn't going to be the face or even really related to my fishing company. I talk about it. I do a lot of fishing, obviously, but I realized that if someone went to my Instagram page or my Twitter and I was promoting this bass fishing company, and they're seeing me on red carpets, and they're seeing me wearing suits, and they're seeing me interviewing wrestlers, they'd be like, that's the guy? And I realized that I needed to take a step away from that, and my friend who is much more in that space, my business partner, he should be the face of this. So that was an interesting decision to make.
I'm going to get to that because that's part of one of the questions I want to ask you about is branding. But I wanted to first kind of go back a little bit to what you were just talking about. So as it relates to these different, whatever, like things that you're involved with and what have you, people don't know when they're not getting momentum, when it's time to pivot or when it's time to double down. So how do you know, hey, this isn't working, or hey, I need to keep pushing? Because a lot of people they'll do is they'll push themselves to a point, not unlike what I did, where I pushed my health into the ground entirely, realizing that, hey, I should have made a pivot and recognized I can't keep operating the way that I'm operating. And the problem is with type A people, probably, like both you and I, is that we know no quit, right? Like, it's just, I will kill myself for this thing that I envision. But sometimes that can also be our own worst enemy. That can be our Achilles heel. So how do you know when to assess, hey, this thing is working, this is a home run, I need to keep swinging, even though this last video or this last whatever wasn't a home run, versus, man, it's time to shift gears and go a different direction?
I've had a nice safety net of working for a TV station. Okay. So it's been like, everything I've been doing with my YouTube channel, my podcast, and this fishing company has kind of been on the side. So I've had this nice safety net of being like, well, if that didn't work, I still have a paycheck over here.
Right.
And I think that that's a really important thing to understand. Like, I think a lot of people just get out of college and they're like, I'm going to dive headfirst into being an entrepreneur.
Oops.
But that's like, it's an exciting venture.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can also like end up being 30 and going,
it's painful.
Oh my God, like I have nothing. Like, and I didn't want to have that. So I had this nice safety net and an amazing experiences. Like in the last year, I've interviewed Tom Cruise in front of the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and
that's crazy.
I've interviewed The Rock a handful of times. Like, I've done some really cool things, and I've been fortunate to win some awards with what I'm doing. I had if people don't know who I am from anything we've talked about now, they will probably know the viral moment when Dakota Johnson and Leslie Mann hit on me during an interview and asked me to take my shirt off.
It only has like 10 million views at this point.
So that exploded all over the internet, and like I had the safety net of having this job. So I think that like I didn't have to worry about pivoting as much, because if something didn't work, I went, oh, that's okay. This thing that takes up 10% of my time didn't work. That's all right.
And you didn't find, because some people, their argument is that entrepreneurship, and I just finished reading Think and Grow Rich, and he's like, you need to burn the ships. You need to be all in, or else it's not going to work. And entrepreneurship, that's kind of what it requires, is that kind of, passion and persistence towards that. So how have you managed to keep that despite the fact that it has only been 10% of your time?
Well, and now I'm starting to realize that like it's going to start to be a reverse here.
Which is amazing.
Yeah. So I think that, and I agree with that. If you want to take the island, you do have to burn the boats. But I think you have to know what you're getting yourself into. And I think
so it's more when to burn the boats, not if to burn the boats.
That's it right there. That should be the phrase.
And that's the right. And I always say that. And I just taught that in the web class from this book club that I run, this digital book club that I run for my students. And I was like, guys, look, be careful with this advice. Because this whole burn the boats thing is just thrown out in a way too cavalier manner. Mm-hmm. Because you need to know specific, it's a transition. You don't just one day say, yeah, I'm quitting, man. It's like, dude, what are you gonna live under a bridge while you build your business? Like, what are you gonna eat?
Yeah, and I think that unless you have a bunch of money saved up,
right,
or you have a partner that's helping you out, or you're able to live at home still, or whatever the case is, I think that you can't just go do this on your own,
right?
Because otherwise, you're gonna be living under a bridge, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so let's get to the branding aspect, because in my opinion, and I want to talk about this a little bit later as we talk about AEW and kind of what you've done with content marketing, but you are involved with a lot of different things. And that's also me being a multi-passionate person as well. That's kind of what I aspire to do too, and also what I do.
Yeah.
And I'm always very protective of how does this create a perception of my brand maybe counterintuitive to what I'm trying to create.
Sure.
Right? Like, I'm the entrepreneur guy, so if I'm also talking about pro wrestling, like even this interview, I'm like, how much are we going to talk about pro wrestling, and is that going to impact what I'm doing? So it sounds like you've kind of taken a back role in some capacities.
Sure.
But what have you done in terms of respecting the brand of Chris Van Vliet that you've created, also being mindful of, I can't be viewed as everything, I have to be viewed as one thing, or people are going to innately put you in a box, because that's just how our brains work.
Yeah.
You know, so you're going to become the wrestling guy, you're becoming this guy or that guy.
Yeah.
How have you managed that, or have you even been mindful of that, or are you just pursuing your passions and letting it fall into place?
I've been really mindful of it because Instagram in particular and YouTube are very niche oriented.
Sure.
And if you're doing 5 different things, you're going to lose your audience. And I realized this maybe a year-ish ago, that I was a lot of things to a lot of different audiences. And by no means is Chris Van Vliet a brand, or like anybody even really knows who I am, really outside of the wrestling world. And I kind of realized that was the biggest piece of the pie here, so I would start to double down on that.
Interesting.
And you look at my posts in the last year or so, and they're mostly wrestling based because I knew that they were doing better. But I had a while there where I was a little bit of a fisherman. Well, I still am. If you looked at my Instagram page, I was a bass fisherman. I was a guy who wore suits. I was a guy who interviewed celebrities, and I was a guy who liked wrestling. And the thing was, if I posted a wrestling thing, all the suit guys, all the fashion people were like, what the hell is this? And then if I posted a suit thing, the bass fishing people were like, what why is he posing like, and you know the Instagram fashion poses. It's like I don't know the camera's there, you know.
Right.
But like, I was trying to make a space in all of these and realizing that you can't do that. It was actually hurting my page to do that. So
Interesting.
Up until about a year ago, I was interviewing, well, I still do for my TV job, interviewing celebrities and interviewing musicians. And I was putting those on my YouTube channel and realizing they weren't really doing that well. The wrestling was doing what was the best, that was driving the channel. So I realized that about a year ago that I wasn't going to upload movie interviews anymore. Even though some of them, like some of my biggest interviews on my channel, are movie interviews, celebrity interviews. But I realized that my audience was wrestling fans. And I would put a movie interview up, and the comments would be like, this isn't a wrestler. Or, you know, when's your next wrestling interview? Can't wait for another wrestling interview.
Interesting.
So I was just kind of listening to the people. And the biggest thing I've learned through this process is reading the comments. And I think there will be a lot of people that say, don't read the comments. I read the comments and kind of get a feel for what people like and what they don't like.
Yeah, you're highly engaged in your comments.
It's super important, and that's a Gary Vaynerchuk tip as well.
Totally.
If you can't take 3 seconds out of your day to say thank you to someone or to respond to a simple question they've asked, like, do you really need, like, deserve them? You know, if they ask you a question and they've taken their time to watch your video or engage with your content, you can't take 3 seconds out of your day to say thank you or to answer their question. It just seems like you're not grateful at all.
Right. Now, would you recommend creating sub-brands? So let's say instead of your Instagram page where you do wrestling, would you recommend people that do have multi-passions to create another Instagram account that's different and completely...
I think if you're starting out and you're not sure which one's going to be your thing,
play with the waters and see.
Yeah, but then you have to focus your efforts equally on all of them.
Okay.
Because if you have these 5 different interests and 5 different Instagram pages, and these 4 aren't growing because you're not watering them, you know.
And that's the problem, is that people are focused in a lot of different directions, and this goes back to Essentialism. I don't know if you read the book, but like one of my favorite books of all time, and that's one of the main core principles, is like so many people are focused in so many different directions that if they just focus in one, they'd get a lot more windfall, a lot more.
Yeah, I mean the grass is greener where you water it.
Right.
You know? And I think that if you have these 5 different passions, any one of them could be the thing that, you know, does really well for you if you just water it, if you just put your time and your efforts into it.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, think that just because they've created it, it should just innately grow from there. And that is certainly not how it works.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about your platform with YouTube. Somebody's watching this and they're like, man, this guy has 200,000 subscribers, or within the week. By the time people are watching this, you're going to have 200,000 subscribers. We're guaranteeing that. I'm guaranteeing that. So what do you recommend they do? Were there programs that you went through? How did you just start playing with YouTube? How did you start to figure out what works, what doesn't work, how to grow this audience? Because I see too many people, they try something, it doesn't work, but the problem is that they just weren't prepared for doing and there's so much out there, right? Like when you started out, there's the Dave Meltzers, there's all these guys that are already creating this wrestling content. Not Sam, so on and so. I mean, there's a ton of guys out there doing this. So how did you address this thing with, yes, I want to jump in and just do it, right? Because that's a huge part. It's just taking the leap, but also preparing yourself enough to the point where you're not, hey, I'm not ready yet because I still need to learn some things, right? Like, how do you balance those two, kind of juxtapose opposing thoughts?
I'm super glad that when I started my YouTube channel in 2011, that I wasn't going in and going, I'm a YouTuber, like this is the only thing I'm doing. So that helped a lot.
Interesting.
I remember getting...
In what way do you mean by that?
So it helped that like I was doing this other thing, like hosting the TV show, and then I would just post a YouTube video when I felt like it.
Okay, I got it.
Sometimes it was once a month. Sometimes it was 3 times a month. Like just,
Sure.
I didn't want to be like just deemed as a YouTube person. Especially in 2011, like nobody was really doing it successfully on a big scale. I mean, there were a handful of people, but that was it. So I think for me, it was like I was just going to continue to do this stuff and put it out there. What changed for me was looking at other channels and seeing why they were successful.
Interesting.
So I would say that if we're going to speak about YouTube specifically, if you're on the cusp and you're thinking about doing this, I would say take like a good month or 2 or 3 and actually break down and study some channels that you like. Why do you like them? What works for them? What are the length of their videos? What do their thumbnails look like? What do their descriptions look like? Do they have links in there? Do they speak directly to the camera? Do they speak to someone like this? All of those little things, like make notes about them and realize why that's working for them.
Interesting.
Then when it's time for you to make your videos, put them out there. And don't really care, don't really dissect your first 10 or 20 of them, because they're going to suck. My first bunch of podcasts, I think I put out 30 now. The first bunch, I look back and I'm like, oh, these aren't so good. But realize that, like, nobody was listening to the first 100 episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience. And look at him now. I went back recently. Even, like, episode 300 still looks a little, like, rudimentary.
Right.
So just realize that, like, putting something out there is better than putting nothing out there. But have a path, like, know what you want to do. It's
interesting because we talked earlier about reverse engineering and kind of following people's paths, which I know we're now kind of back on that subject again. But that really gave me a lot of confidence in seeing, like Lewis House, for example. I went back and I looked at his early reviews. And it was like, how is this guy getting these guests? He's terrible. The audio's awful. And I learned a lot about what not to do, like I said before, from reading his early reviews and kind of re-dissecting some of the things that he made mistakes about. And I know I made that point, but I think there's another way to reiterate that. So as that all is said then, as you were starting to see the growth, did you then start to learn more about what to do, or is it just analyzing what other people are doing, or how did you start were you doing like, hey, it's time to start doing vidIQ, it's time to start really doubling down on my investment and paying for courses or knowledge on how to do this
stuff? So my story in a nutshell was I was basically we would get these wrestlers that would come to the studio and they wanted to promote Monday Night Raw or SmackDown or whatever it was, and you'd put like 20-30 seconds of that interview on TV, like, hey, tickets are on sale for $20. That would be what we put on TV. But here I am next to like a legendary wrestler as a massive wrestling fan. So I'm like, I want to ask them questions I'm like genuinely interested in. So I would ask questions for 10 and 15 and 20 minutes. And after we'd only air 20-30 seconds, I'd be like, well, someone needs to see this. Like someone else would appreciate this as much as I do.
Interesting.
Sometimes I would ask like newsworthy questions that would make headlines. So I'm like, I'm just going to go put this out there. So I would just put it on my YouTube channel, which had like 4 subscribers at the time, like one of them being my mom. And I would just put it out there and be like, if a handful of other people, if 30 other people watch this, that'll make me feel good. Like as a fellow wrestling fan, just like sharing this with, my other wrestling fans. And then when some videos started like, getting a better uptick, I was like, well, maybe I should do this more often. Maybe I should, if there's a wrestling show in town that's not coming to our TV station, I should go to them and do an interview.
Interesting.
And, put that on my channel. So that was kind of the next step. And then as those videos started to grow, I went, okay, I got to start like branding my channel. And that's only been in the last like year and a half. I got a logo, which costs like a couple dollars on like Fiverr or something. I made my thumbnails look better. And that was a big thing. I think people should, and think about this, your favorite YouTube channels, without ever looking at the description of the video, you know what channel it is by looking at the thumbnail.
100%.
And that was a big thing for me when someone pointed that out. So all my thumbnails have a very similar look to them. And I think that because of that, I think they're showing up now more in the suggested. And it's just kind of been this snowball. But it's super important to point out that YouTube is like the slowest platform to grow on.
Interesting.
Oh, it's so slow.
Interesting.
So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
I mean, you're jumping into this now. It's so slow.
Yeah. Well, I know collaboration helps a lot.
It does.
So fortunately, my wife is here, and she's built hers to 35,000.
That's great.
You know, and I just went on one that was 9,000, and I went on as a guest, and I was like, just talking about it, and obviously plug my channel, what have you. So I know that's a huge growth hack. I hate that term, but that is a huge growth hack to like appear on other people's platforms.
The thing is, follow me on Instagram, follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook. That's all in our like daily vernacular.
Sure.
Subscribe to me on YouTube is not something that people often think about.
It's true.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had 4 subscribers. Your mom being one of them. You're interviewing The Rock. I don't know if this is like the same timeline, around the same time. How did you start feeling comfortable? A lot of people will hold themselves back, right? Upper limit problem. They'll hold themselves back from reaching out to somebody to come on their show, right? Mm-hmm. Because they don't feel like they're ready, or they feel like their show's not big enough, or what have you. At what point was that a reality for you? Did you just always reach out and be like, hey, whatever, we're going to make this happen? I think a lot of the credibility with your job kind of helped you maybe in that capacity.
For sure it did, yeah.
But I know a lot of people hold themselves back, and that's one of the biggest things that I think when people look at the guests that I've had on my show, it's like, dude, I just asked. Right? Now, that all said, I think a lot of people also don't recognize the assets that they do have.
Yes.
Right? So like, I leveraged every little bit of credibility. And you've seen our little spiel that we send out.
Yeah, it's great.
Like, right? Like, we tell you, like, here's the amount of downloads we get, here's the guests we've had, this is what we do, we were trending, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. I think some people don't look at it and say, okay, here's what I don't have, but here's what I do have that I can pitch, right? So how did you address that with getting these big people on? Was it just the job and the credibility with the job? Or were there other things that you had to do to say, hey, I know this thing is small, right? But you should still come on my show.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing, and you touched on it there, is what value can you bring to them?
Sure.
Because they're obviously giving you their most important thing, which is their time.
Right.
So what can you give to them in exchange? What's your exposure, or what, like you said, you were trending. That was a huge thing, like that you were able to provide value to someone. So I think that's what you need to lead with. I get messages where it's like, we've just started a podcast, or we're super small. It's like, why are these the things you're leading with? Like, lead with.
You give me all the reasons to not do
it. Lead with what you can do. I was obviously in a very unique situation with my broadcast background. Through working in my job, I'm verified on these platforms, which I think has helped at least with the perception.
Oh my gosh, yeah, totally.
And then it's pretty. I think it helps to be able to, like, for example, for my platform, for my YouTube channel, to be able to go, all right, so in the last year I've interviewed The Rock and John Cena and Batista and then someone who's maybe at a slightly lower level than them could go, oh wow, well, if those people have trusted him, then I can too.
Right.
So I think that if you can get a big guest, or if you get lucky by getting one, leverage that as much as you can and say, I've interviewed so and so, and then it kind of speaks for itself.
Right. Yeah, well, I think so many people, they don't do what you're talking about, and that's why they can't seemingly get some of those bigger guests to come on their platforms, right? And they're just trying. And then the other thing, too, is I think they don't recognize, like you said, the value that they can actually provide to those,
so
people.
Figure out what that value is.
But here's the crazy thing, man, is that I don't think I've had a better, I always say this, the podcast or any kind of content platform, people are always complaining about, oh, I can't get this opportunity, or I can't get this investor's attention, or I can't get this connection that I need, or I need to network, but this person won't respond to my emails. I'm like, dude, go build an audience and then go pitch that person and watch what happens, right? Like, perfect example. I think we reached out to you, earlier this week about doing this?
Yeah.
You're busy AF this weekend, like with everything that's going on, right?
Though,
But what I'm saying, though, is that if I was just a dude that just reached out to you because your email's on your Twitter, right? And I just said, hey, man, I'm going to be in Chicago. I'm just a bro. Want to hang? Like, we would not be doing this. We wouldn't be having this conversation. This would have never happened.
I'd probably still be sleeping in this bed.
Sorry. I'm totally robbing you of your beauty rest here. No. But you know what I'm saying, though? Like, a lot of people, I think they dismiss the power of building a brand.
Yeah.
Because it is concrete, or dynamite to concrete doors. I mean, it is unbelievable what you can do. And even like I mentioned before, now there's people that are coming to me that are like, hey man, can you connect me with so-and-so or so-and-so or such and such? And it's like, I have them on the podcast, I make a recommendation. I'm not going to give you a side pitch, by the way. There's nobody I'm like low-key, like having an agenda here. This is just chatting.
I think the biggest thing that people need to realize is the worst thing that could happen is someone doesn't write back to you.
Sure.
That's the worst.
Right.
That's the worst thing that could happen.
Right.
They could say no or not respond to you.
Right.
And if that's the worst case scenario, why don't you hit up everybody?
Right.
You know, if you throw enough spaghetti at the wall, one piece is going to stick. So I think that people get in their own way. I think they go, well, I could never reach out to that person. They'd never get back to me. Well, how do you know?
Yeah.
And you don't know till you try. It's the same thing with like dating. If there's that man or that woman at the bar, like, oh, she'd never go out with me. He'd never go out with me.
Yeah.
You'll never know till you try.
Right.
So I think you need to ask. That's
Right.
a big thing.
But then being strategic about your ass too, like you talked
yes,
about.
then I
You
think
can't just be like,
plan.
hey man.
Yeah, like, hey, want to do an interview? No, like you said, be strategic,
Right.
provide value, but then ask, and don't be afraid to send out 20 emails today.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to send out 20 more tomorrow.
Right.
One person will eventually get back to you.
Right. AEW. I've been holding back.
So that's
on
why we're in town. Yes.
nerding out about the wrestling talk this whole time to just provide value to the audience, but I would be remiss if we didn't talk about it a little bit. What's crazy to me is I preach content marketing. Like I preach create searchable content, right? Because there's so many entrepreneurs that are out, and I love the idea. I love chasing opportunities. I love sending emails. I love doing all these various things in terms of outbound opportunities. But creating inbound opportunities is one of the best things you can do via high quality searchable content.
Sure.
Right? AEW, what fascinated me the most, it's funny because I'm a huge comic book fan, and this is like the golden age of comic book movies, right? Like I never thought in my lifetime this would happen. And then I'm like you, Attitude Era wrestling fan, loved it, kind of started to get a little hokey. It's kind of started to be like, I was embarrassed to share with my friends, stuff like that, from the other guys.
Yeah.
And
I
now,
stuck with it, but I agree with what you're saying.
I still
Yeah.
watch the big shows. I still watch the Rumbles. I still watch the Manias, the SummerSlams, and what have you. But in terms of the just like obsessive Monday Night Raw, like I would block out my whole schedule. This is what I'm doing on Monday nights,
Yeah.
or in the case of SmackDown as well.
Yeah.
So all of that happened because these guys had an idea to start a vlog, independent wrestlers.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, they basically had got $100 million in seed funding to start this thing. I mean, I know Tony Khan owns the organization. Like, they didn't give them the money. They're just doing their own thing. But effectively speaking,
Yeah.
they started this entire thing where we filled it. They filled an entire... I said we. They filled... I feel like I'm part of it. They filled
We're all part of it.
an entire arena, and they're
Yeah.
selling out like this. And it's all... It blows my mind, man, because it's all because of content marketing.
Yeah.
Right? So talk about that. Is that the new modality? Is that the new medium for marketing yourself in 2019 and beyond? And what's the real opportunity there for people that are, and I'm asking you this, let me give you a little more context here. With people that are looking for venture funding, right?
Mm-hmm.
The technology startups and so on and so forth, they tell themselves, I can't start this thing until I get funding. If the Young Bucks had that attitude, they'd still
Yeah.
be running around the independents right
Yeah.
now, right? Like that wouldn't have
Yeah.
happened, right? So as you see it, is that the new way to get attention from investors, to get attention for your business, to get leads for your business, right? Like
That's the best way to do everything.
like I don't get how people
Because-
don't see that.
Yeah, and there's no longer the gatekeepers here. Like, it used to be like, oh, I need to get an article in this magazine, or I need to be on this TV show or this radio station. All that stuff certainly helps. But if you can create something on your own, like the Young Bucks here, who created Being the Elite, this great YouTube channel, which has now led to them being executive vice presidents with this new wrestling
That's
company.
ridiculous.
Now they're millionaire wrestlers, which is awesome. They created this all for themselves. And the cool thing is when you're putting out your own content on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and, of course, YouTube, you're controlling the content, too. You're the storyteller.
Right.
When you do an interview with somebody for a magazine, you're kind of handing them all this stuff, and then they pick and choose what they want, and they make an article about it. Or, they can edit it up and make a little YouTube video about that. When you're in control of it, that changes everything. And I think it's an interesting world we live in with venture capitalists now, because you're basically celebrating that you have to pay someone back.
That's
Cool. It's cool that someone is like, I think what we're celebrating here is someone sees something in you.
that's what it is.
Right.
It's self-affirmation. It's
Yes.
telling them like, hey, we've made it.
Yes.
But oftentimes what happens is that the book has yet to be written. Like, you're now writing the book. Like, you're
Yeah.
just starting once you get funding. And I think a lot of people, they celebrate that as like, hey, we got funding. But I think you're right, man. I think it's self-awareness. I think they just think like, somebody believes in me.
Yes, and that's exactly what it is. It's like a pat on the back, but it's like, well, yeah, but now the work starts, and now you don't own 100% of the company anymore. So it's a strange thing that we're celebrating that now.
Yeah.
But I get that, if your business is really big, that is an important part of it.
Sure. But here's the thing, though. I would argue that if you've built a platform, right, and you're getting, so Young Bucks, I don't know, I've heard estimates about how much they make from literally just selling t-shirts. Everybody joked around saying AEW was a t-shirt company for a long time, right? That was like the ongoing joke.
Yeah.
Here's the deal. When you do go to the table with an investor and you do have a platform with 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 YouTube subscribers, or let's say it's blog views or whatever content platform you've created, and you are generating business on your own, when you sit down at that negotiation table, you've got leverage.
Yes.
Otherwise, if you're sitting there and you need this money to even exist, what kind of leverage do you have in negotiation? You have no power. You're just banking 100% on them maybe doing you a favor. And I mean, it's not a favor. Like, they're obviously in business with you and they're looking to turn a profit.
Yeah.
But I just feel like I would hate to be in that. And I've been in that situation, right, where my business was not doing so great or what have you, and I was getting sick. I told you my story.
Yeah.
And like I was pitching investors so that I could hire out, so that I could take a step back and take a sabbatical and focus on my health. And I remember I never felt so desperate in my life to have to like ask someone else for the help that I felt like, I just didn't have any power in the equation, right?
Yeah.
So is that how you see it? That this is more so empowering you so that you have the right mindset of, I can make this work with or without you, but it's going to go faster with you.
And I think that's why VCs are important is being able to bring in their money and then scale things quickly.
Right.
But I think that some people go, well, my business isn't going to be deemed a success in my eyes until it's worth 5 million, 10 million, 100 million, whatever.
Right.
If your business is like grossing enough money to like pay your bills when you're starting out, like you're way further ahead than anybody else who's doing this. And I think that people set those specific goals, which are great, but those goals might be 5 or 10 or 20 years off, not realizing that in the short term, like, let's get our mortgage paid. Let's get like our car paid. Like, let's not live in debt here. Like if you're able to do that, if you're able to be like, when you get to a point where you're cash flow positive with your business, like that should be the celebration.
Huge celebration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that changes everything.
Well, and it goes back to the vague goals. I think that's why people are like, I need funding, because they haven't ironed out the steps of like, what can I do right now?
Yeah.
Right. So not to keep like going back to that, but I think it's really important.
It
I think
is.
That's where I think when you talk about general application and not just being something cool you put on a T-shirt, which you've done. But that's the application. That's to me what that looks like.
Yeah, and I've had I had a bunch of people come up to me at All Out this week and at the AEW show going, man, that really spoke to me. And it's like, it's such a
awesome.
It's such a simple phrase, but it can be applied to anything in your life. We've obviously talked about it applying today to starting a business or a YouTube channel or podcast, but it can be applied to literally anything. To set a specific goal and then understand what it takes to get there.
Yeah, cool. You've got a flight to catch, and I hope everything's okay back home, because you're a South Florida guy, and Dorian is like beating down your front door right now, it appears.
We were really nervous when we flew out here, because we flew out here on Friday, and at that point the hurricane looked like it was going to barrel like right for my house. Looks like at this point in time everything looks like it's okay. Cool. I've lived in Florida for 5 years,
so it's you kind of get used to it. Yeah,
I'm definitely not as used to it as like my friends who've lived there their whole life. But I just bought my house, and then Hurricane Matthew came through, and we got very fortunate there. And then Hurricane Irma was not long after that, a year later. Yeah, it's just not fun. There's a lot of flooding and lines for gas, and everyone runs out of water. So I'm hoping everything's okay.
Yeah, we went through Maria a couple years ago with my wife's family in Puerto Rico, and we went like a month or so after, and that was devastating to see. And on an island, it's so much more difficult, because there's no way to just logistically get supplies there, right? So it's terrible, man. So hoping and praying for the best in your situation in this case, man. That's tough.
I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for allowing me to talk about all this stuff. This is I don't get to talk about
you're always interviewing people.
Yeah,
I'm glad to have you talk.
I don't get to talk about the businesses that I'm that I'm part of, and I think a lot of people that watch my YouTube videos don't know that I have this fishing company as well.
Yeah.
I just it goes back to my goal from my senior year, like to not hate my job. And that does sound like a very vague goal. I get that.
Yeah.
But then that was the baseline for like, okay, then if that's what my vague goal is now to not hate my job, well, then what jobs can I like?
Right.
I want to get this job and this job and this job.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just say thanks for having me on. This is
man,
great.
It was awesome, dude. It was a
Congrats
pleasure.
to you on everything.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So where can people learn more about what you're up to? Maybe they're wrestling fans or not, but they would appreciate the art form that you have with interviewing people.
Yeah.
Where can they learn more about you or your other businesses?
It's just
you're
my name,
involved
Chris Van Vliet. That's on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and of course my YouTube channel. And I appreciate you letting me come on here and tell my story.
with? Sweet, man. I enjoyed it, brother.
Yeah,
Thanks
thanks
so much.
Chris. Great
All right,
name
guys.
too.
Yeah, right? See you guys. All right, guys. Thanks for checking out the video today. Make sure to like and subscribe or share this video with a friend. If you know somebody that's trying to brand themselves currently, maybe this is a great video for them. While you guys are at it also, make sure to bounce on over and follow Chris Van Vliet's stuff, right? Follow his and subscribe to his YouTube channel. Follow him on social media. He's doing some really awesome stuff. Even if you're not a pro wrestling fan, he's doing some really cool stuff that you can check out. And he's just overall just a tremendous dude. And it was a real honor to be able to sit down and chat with him. So there's a ton of resources below. Make sure you check that out in the description. We include a lot of different resources and what have you for entrepreneurs, specifically for either trying to build a business. There's a lot of awesome business building tools down there below, as well as all of the equipment that we use too. So if you're curious about the stuff we use to record this, as well as the actual discussion with Chris himself, you can check that. I link most of those down below as well. All right, guys, I will see you in the next one, and thanks for watching all the way to the end of this video.